Good morning, everyone. I'm Muriel Bowser. I'm the mayor of Washington, D.C. I'm joined by members of my cabinet to provide a situational update on the district's response to COVID-19, and more specifically, an update on our summer and public education plans. I'm joined by Dr. LaQuandra Nesbitt, who is the district's director of the Department of Health, as well as Chris Rodriguez, who is the director of the district's Homeland Security Agency, and Deputy Mayor Paul Kine, the Deputy Mayor for Education, and Chancellor Louis Farabee, who is the Chancellor of the District of Columbia Public Schools. So we were together a couple of weeks ago to talk about schools, and then we determined that we would follow 2 more weeks of data, and we have followed that data and will be providing an update on our public school plans. And I'm going to turn it over now to Deputy Mayor Kine, who will talk more about summer and the start of school. We'll hear from Chancellor Louis Farabee, and Dr. Nesbitt and Dr. Rodriguez and myself will be available for questions. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Mayor. And before we begin our discussion of schools, I want to share some good news about the Summer Youth Employment Program. And we are delighted to announce that we are extending the program by 2 weeks. I am personally, I know the Mayor is very proud of the team at the Department of Employment Services and all of our host partners for adapting so quickly and making this summer work. We have had over 8,000 young people in our community engaging in this program, and I'm happy that our young people will get more time to learn new skills and engage more deeply with their programs and their mentors. I also want to take this opportunity to remind students and families who plan to apply for DC TAG that the deadline to apply has been extended from Thursday, July 23rd to Monday, September 7th. Through DC TAG, students can receive up to $10,000 per year to help cover the cost of a 2-year or 4-year college or university. And you can learn more about this program at osce.dc.gov/DC TAG. Now, I want to talk about the upcoming school year at DC Public Schools. I want to begin by thanking all of the students and families and all of the staff and educators who assisted us in making these plans by filling out the school survey last month. We received over 17,000 responses, and overwhelmingly, you asked us to prioritize health and safety, consistency and predictability in school scheduling, and family choice between in-person and virtual learning. And you will see these priorities reflected in our plans. Our top priority in planning for this school year is, of course, the health and well-being of our students, staff, families, and community. We all understand that this school year will require flexibility from everyone. And with that in mind, we are moving forward with an all-virtual start to the school year for students in pre-K through the 12th grade, through term 1 until November 6th. I want to reassure you also, all of the families that said they wanted in-person options and all of the educators who have shared with us their desire to be with and work with the students who need it the most, that we will continue to plan for in-person options for term 2. And so, before I hand it off to the Chancellor to walk us through the rest of the presentation, I do want to make this clear. We understand the concerns families and our community have about access to technology. In fact, we share those concerns because we understand the reality of inequality in our city. That is, in large part, what makes me so concerned about having students out of the classroom for months at a time. But we are committed to getting every student who needs a device or internet access the tools they need to successfully participate in virtual learning. School will be in session, and we need to ensure that all students who need it have access and are able to participate. With this in mind, we started distributing devices last school year, and those efforts continue. I want to thank the families who have already completed the DCPS technology survey and encourage those who have not yet done so to complete it as soon as possible. Families can also call their child's school to let them know about their technology needs, and the school will submit that information to DCPS on their behalf. Now with that, I'm going to hand it over to the Chancellor to walk us through what DCPS has learned so far from the survey, as well as some of what families can expect for term 1 for this school year. Chancellor?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. As the Deputy Mayor highlighted, it's important for DC Public Schools to understand the landscape of the digital divide for our students and our families. We've collected data, and as of today, we have over 13,000 respondents to our technology survey. As you can see on the data that's presented, many of our students who are represented in our earliest grade levels are represented in the survey. We believe that's related to the fact that we prioritize our secondary students for device distribution in the spring. And so we'll continue to collect family data as it relates to technology. We also will continue to rely on our partners to help us reach out to families and, again, better understand the landscape of need as it relates to devices. I want to dig a little bit deeper into the 3 areas that we are collecting information. First is device availability, and so we are currently seeing about 44% of our students have indicated that they do not have a device or access to a device at home, which represents a alignment with the way that we have been planning and preparing for the 2021 school year. And we're estimating about 40 to 50% of our students may not have access to a device at home. The second area is accessibility. So not only do we want to understand whether a student has a device at home, we also want to understand whether that device is accessible throughout the day and any time for learning. And what we've seen in the students that have devices, the majority of them have access to that device throughout the day, and 77% of those students have indicated that they're prepared for our learning at home posture as it relates to technology. As we shift gears to internet availability, which is our third area that we've asked families to share more information with us, we see that of the students that have already completed the survey and families represented, the majority of our students have access to reliable high-speed internet access without a DCPS hotspot. And so we know that it is critical that students have access to the internet, especially high-speed internet, to ensure that they are able to connect with our learning platforms. Again, we'll continue to collect information from our families on these 3 areas. We're encouraging families to go to our website, which is DCPS Tech Survey, bit.ly/DCPS Tech Survey. And again, we'll continue to rely on our partners to help us collect this information. As we think about virtual learning, we have been preparing for a strong opening of the 2021 school year, reflecting on some of the feedback we received from families from the spring. As a result of the work and the planning, we are prepared to deliver a more consistent schedule for families to ensure that our staff members can stay connected with our students and our lessons are engaging and enriching. We also heard from families that our platforms needed to be streamlined, so we have fewer platforms for families to access, which includes our Canvas umbrella, where students and families can find a plethora of information and links to instructional materials and supports needed for learning at home. We also have clear policies and procedures for attendance to ensure that all students and families clearly understand our policies and regulations as it relates to attendance, and the deeper understanding that we expect all of our students to be engaged every day. And we'll share a little bit more about those schedules as we've structured the day differently to include more interactive learning time, but also live synchronous learning time where all students would be with an instructor and also independent learning time. And again, we're going to provide more details of what that looks like for each student. In preparing for the 2021 school year, we also know that we have students who have unique needs. So DCPS is prepared to ensure that students that have special education services or need English language supports or other required supports will still have access to these services. Learning at home may include co-taught classrooms with individuals that are special education teachers or regular education teachers. And we'll also continue to ensure that our English language learners teachers are engaged with those students who require those services. Any student with an individualized education plan will have a distance learning plan addendum added to their IEP. As we think about social emotional development, DCPS spent a lot of time with our teachers in June preparing not only to meet the academic needs of our students, but also to ensure that wellness was integrated into their learning time. DCPS is prepared to ensure that daily lessons include social emotional development activities to ensure that students are well, and we continue to build our trusting relationships with our students and our families. Our virtual learning experience will be live, as I mentioned earlier, through several sessions where students will log in and have instruction over a period of time with the teacher, and these schedules will be predictable in terms of a daily schedule for students and a weekly schedule for students. And it represents also not only the feedback we receive, but the hard work of our teachers throughout this summer to ensure that we're able to transfer our curriculum to online experiences. We had over 200 teachers help prepare our curriculum to ensure that it's more user-friendly, efficient, and organized to support a virtual learning experience. We also know that we need to continue to monitor student progress and proficiency. So we've also designed learning checks throughout the day and throughout the semester to ensure that we better understand where students have gaps in learning and are mastering our standards accordingly. To ensure that we have predictable and consistent schedules for our students, we've designed schedules differently based on age-appropriate lessons and also grade levels that students are assigned to. So this will look different for our earliest learners as it will look different for our high school students. So let's dive deeper into our pre-K schedule. So before you have an example of a pre-K 3 and pre-K 4 schedule. It's important to note you'll see that this schedule has been designed to have shorter bursts of learning throughout the day, knowing that the attention span of our 3-year and 4-year-olds are different. It also includes our nap time, which is a part of the schedule for in-person instruction for students as well. It also includes independent time for students and one-on-one and check-ins for students along with small group instruction. We believe that this supports the developmental needs for our earliest learners and also provides the appropriate learning time for them to be successful and continue to master the critical early literacy skills needed for kindergarten. As we transition to our K-2 students, you see that they will have additional learning time, but you see a similar structure of blocks of learning time for literacy, math, social studies, and science. And also you see that there is time for morning meetings and electives for students. Students in K-2 will experience about 2 hours of live instruction daily. As we transition to our students in grades 3 through 5 at the elementary level, it mirrors what we see in K-2. However, those students will have 2 to 3 hours of live instruction daily. And again, those schedules will be predictable for families on a daily basis, and the day will start earlier for our elementary age students. For our secondary students, their day will start a little bit later, but for our middle school students, it's important to note that they will have a rotating A-day, B-day schedule to maximize course offerings. Middle school students will have up to 7 to 8 courses, which includes an advisory period to start the day and also time for their English language arts, social studies, science, small group instructions, and include opportunities for electives such as world languages. Students will also have all of these sessions in a live scheduled day where they have periods of learning and independent learning time throughout the day. For our high school students, they will start the latest, and again, we know that aligns with research around how our high school students learn. It's also important to note that we'll continue to provide our opportunity academies, which will have flexible schedules for students that may need to have evening instructional time. For high school students, they will have a 4-period block day, which includes time for English, math, and also science and social studies, and also includes independent time for students as well. Our high school students will have 4 to 5 hours of instructional time that will be live daily, and then students will also have independent time for learning. Across all of our grade levels, the majority of the independent learning time will take place on Wednesdays. We believe this also allows us to easily transfer the learning time from learning at home to a hybrid structure should we move in that direction for term 2, which allows us to maintain that same Wednesday independent learning day. Next steps for our families ensure that all of our students are enrolled. If a child is not enrolled already, we want them to go to our website, enrolldcps.dc.gov. We also want to ensure that all of our families take our technology survey or reach out to their school to let them know where their child's technology needs are, so we can better understand whether students need a device or whether or not they need support with internet access. And then finally, we've had several virtual town halls for families to share more information about the opening for the 2021 school year. If you hadn't had an opportunity to listen in or see these town halls, please go to our website at DCPS July Town Halls to watch videos and learn more about how we're preparing for a strong opening for the 2021 school year. And then finally, for families, a reminder that we will continue our parent university sessions, which were well attended and very informative for families in preparing for learning at home or hybrid learning. We will continue these sessions into August, and we'll be providing information on dates for families to learn more. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And we'll take your questions.
How will you be monitoring attendance online as far as, how will that be tracked? How will that be enforced? And then one other question I wanted to add to that, is there going to be any new material that will be taught? And also, what sort of grading will be taking place? Standardized or pass-fail, the way we saw in some other school districts?
I'm going to ask the Chancellor to answer your questions. And also, Paul, if you would address, following that, your discussions with the LEAs. And what did you say your name was?
Aisha with Channel 5, Fox 5.
Chancellor Fairby?
So I can start with grading. So our grading will be similar to the structure we had in the spring for our elementary age students. They receive a grade of a 1, 2, 3, or 4 based on their performance for the term. And that's driven by the assessments that teachers administer and also their guided practice materials in addition to their independent studies and engagement. For our secondary students, students can receive a letter grade or an A or a B. If a student receives a letter grade less than an A than a B, that could be a pass or a fail. If a student wants a letter grade, for example, or a C on their report card, they can request that that grade be presented accordingly. And that represents how we graded in the spring. And it's also important to note that there is greater emphasis in grading on our assessment, but also student engagement and practice.
Question about attendance, how will that be monitored or tracked?
Yeah, just for DCPS, I want to be really clear that we will take attendance daily, and it will be primarily done through students logging in through Canvas, which is our learning platform, and attendance will be taken daily.
Any new material that will be taught?
Yeah, so we have had teachers, as I mentioned earlier, working throughout the summer to do an audit of our curriculum as it relates to user-friendly and online platform and format. But we've also added some additional experiences for students. One that I'm really proud of is our Living Through History Cornerstone, which is an opportunity for students to reflect on their experiences over the spring and the summer. And use that as a learning opportunity. And so threaded throughout our curriculum are those opportunities for students to use real world experiences to expand their learning.
one last question. I know there was a graph that shows, which percentage do have access to these devices and internet, but there was a percentage that doesn't. How many of those students have the devices and internet access, and how will you be addressing that particular percentage?
So we have the capability of providing students devices, and we also have devices that are LTE enabled, where we can connect those devices directly to the internet. And so based on the feedback we get from families through the survey, we'll distribute devices accordingly and provide internet access accordingly.
Yes. Okay. Go ahead, Paul.
I'll just take up briefly on the attendance question. Firstly, we want to be extremely clear about what we're announcing today. School is in session, and I want to remind everyone that schooling is compulsory. We've worked very hard with the Office of the State Superintendent of Education on the new ways in which we are going to track and monitor attendance, and we're doing that across all LEAs in every single public school in the city. So attendance will be taken in this virtual posture as well.
Yes, Mayor. What about the charters? Does this affect the charter schools who, I guess, educate about half the kids in the city? What's the impact here on them?
Sure. Let me turn to Paul to talk about his discussion.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I'm extremely happy to report that we have worked in a very, very collaborative way with charter LEAs across the city. And I think it's fair to say that we are really approaching the current situation and the pandemic and its impact on learning as one public education system in the city, in a collegial manner. Many charter LEAs will be making their announcements about their posture today, tomorrow. We have collaborated on what the scheduling would be. Most schools across the city will have an August 31st start date. Most charter schools, I believe, will adopt a posture similar to DCPS's, and we have full expectation that all charter schools will follow strict health guidance as DCPS is doing.
So,
But may I just jump in as well to add on? When we were together a couple of weeks ago, we laid out several options that we hoped all schools would follow. Was it 5 different scenarios?
It was 4. Yeah.
It was 4 different types of schedules. And Paul has also worked very hard to make sure people were adopting similar terminology. So when parents, whether they're at DCPS or at a public charter school, they would be looking at the same 4 choices in terms of a schedule and be dealing with the same terminology. But let me also be clear about something. What we're announcing today in terms of the virtual start for DCPS, some charter schools or independent schools, private schools in our city, may not be having to make the same types of decisions. So this would not preclude if a public charter school or independent school that they could have an in-person or some type of hybrid arrangement for making that decision for their school.
that was my question to you. I know, for example, a couple of weeks ago, Kip had planned, I think, a day in person. Is that still the case? Are some of them going to be doing in person at this point?
I think it's fair to say that there are going to be a number of different models that they're offering. I think all of us are watching the health conditions and talking to our communities and talking to our educators, and these decisions are changing quite rapidly. So what the mayor said, I think, holds. We've developed a very clear framework for the kind of ways in which public education can look in the city. We have every expectation it will look those ways, and these LEAs will make their own decisions based on their own circumstances.
But you've established that any school at this point is going to have in person. You're dealing with the charters.
That is not a determination that we will make. That we are making a determination for DCPS for term 1. And we have worked, and we hope that any charter school will adopt one of the 4 scenarios that we have discussed. Yes.
Chancellor Farabee, you had talked in the spring when the school year ended several weeks early about catching kids up on what they missed. Are there plans for when school comes back in the fall or later in the school year for looping, like so kids could continue with the teachers they finished, or for extended days or any kind of other enrichment to catch up?
Yeah, so there are a couple points I want to highlight as we think about ensuring that students are on track and are mastering the appropriate skills for their grade level. It's important to note that we are still providing our summer bridge experience for those students entering grades 3, 6, and 9. We believe that this is an important jump start to their school year and allows us to better understand where they are academically and socially, emotionally, and provide supports accordingly. We also have added additional days to our school year, which provides additional learning time for students. And then, as I mentioned earlier today, we'll continue to monitor student performance in a variety of check for understanding and ensure that students have the appropriate prerequisite skills for the content and curriculum for this school year. And as we identify any learning gaps, we would provide additional interventions accordingly, which is why we built a schedule to include small group instructional time and individual instructional time to customize our supports for those students and their specific needs. So we'll continue to assess throughout the school year to ensure that students have what they need academically and socially emotionally. And as relates to looping, it is encouraged where possible, where students can have the same type of relationship experience with the teacher that they've had the previous school year.
When will those additional days be in the school year that you mentioned?
They're threaded throughout the school year for the 2021 school year. So there are additional days in each term.
So like holidays that are no longer days off?
For example, there were work days for staff that are no longer work days and they're instructional days.
So could I just ask about the schedule? Just so the November 6th is the end date, right, for the first term? Is that right?
That is correct.
And so then, is that when they would go on break for the holidays then? When would they come back? When would the second term begin?
November 9th.
Yes.
November 9th, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so just to be clear, there are no students who will go for in-person learning, special needs, or no students at all will go for in-person learning in DCPS this first term, is that correct?
So we will start the school year in an all virtual posture, but we will continue to explore all pathways to provide the supports that students need, and that could be some form of in-person instruction, but we are not able to share what that will be at this point, but we'll continue to explore pathways to support our students.
Mayor, I had one other question.
1 second. Yes.
Thank you. When exactly are you going to start passing out technology, and how will that look like?
So students have technology now.
Sure.
So students have technology for our summer programming, which ends this week, and they'll keep those devices until we have our device turn in for those students that are not returning back to DCPS. Students will have devices for summer youth employment. They've had those devices throughout the summer. And then students who need devices for Summer Bridge will also have devices. So there'll be a steady stream of device distribution between now and August 31st as we collect more data from families about need for device or internet accessibility.
So the ones, I was referring to the folks who have been filling out the survey, so when should they?
If they're a student, for example, if they're a student who completed the survey and they needed a device for Summer Bridge, they would receive that device before Summer Bridge started. For those students who need it for the academic year, they would receive that device before the school year starts, so as the school year starts.
And what accommodations are being made for families who can't access, I know there are the virtual town halls and then the parent university, so if they can access that right now because they're not online, I wonder how that is being, like information from these town halls and from like the parent university, how is that being communicated with folks who don't have devices right now or internet access?
Yes, we'll still continue to reach out to families directly by phone and other means to ensure that we touch all of our families to understand the needs in DCPS, and we'll continue to also rely on our partners who have relationships with families to best understand what the needs are.
Yes.
Mayor, you said you wanted to wait 2 weeks to see what the health metrics were now. what are those metrics that made you decide to start all virtual? Have cases and transmission rates gone up to justify the all virtual start?
No, I wouldn't say that the attention to the health metrics is the only thing that's leading to our decision today. Clearly, we want to work with our workforce. We want to make sure that parents have confidence in in-person option, and then make sure that when we do have an in-person option, that we can maximize the attendance of our teachers and our kids. And so we think that this 2-month period is a good way to start. Yes.
So what metrics or what needs to happen in order to have in-person learning come November 9th for the second term? Is it the health metrics you would be looking at, or is it having the facilities and the staffing, and what is it that you're looking for?
Just what I said, just in response to the previous question, Mark, that there are a lot of things that a system the size of DCPS has to consider when making these decisions, including staffing, including parent confidence, including the facilities availability. We feel very strongly that we have a plan to have all of our facilities with the safety and health infrastructure, if you will. That's kind of a big word for many things. And we feel very strongly that those things are ready, or can be ready on the timeline that we need them to be ready.
For the second term?
Yes.
Can I ask a couple questions to follow up on that? First of all, how much did the teachers' union's clear desire not to go back to school right away play into this decision?
I think that we are certainly going to make the decision that we think is right for DC kids and families. There are a tremendous amount of workforce issues to deal with, for sure, and any decision that we make about reopening, whether it's schools or any other of our agencies. Let me just remind everybody that already 40% of DC government is reporting to work in person, and we make decisions about turning on that activity very, very carefully.
Okay, and also on the dates, this term ends November 6th. I assume you anticipated I'm already getting a tremendous flood of tweets saying, oh, of course, the Democratic administration in DC cancels school until immediately after the presidential election. Can you respond to why this date was chosen, November 6th?
Because that's when the first term ends.
But you think you'll be able to go back to school immediately after the election? Is this?
I don't really follow your question, but that's when the first term ends.
Thank you.
Yes.
Is any consideration given to outdoor education for the younger students during this first term, seeing as it's warm enough now? Or what do you think are your thoughts on like outdoor education?
Yes, consideration was given to outdoor instruction. However, not all of our campuses are suited for outdoor instruction, and so because we're not able to provide the same experience across the district, we obviously have some equity challenges there. And we don't believe that you can have a full instruction